Welcome to Trauma Informed Care and Cultural Responsiveness through Justice Doing. So my name is Anisa Mustafa. I live on the lands of the Doeg and Piscataway people. I've got two cats. Their names are Bobby and JJ. That's very important. Um, and I'm a certified peer recovery specialist and the director of virtual training for One New Heartbeat. And I'm also a lifelong learner. Um, I believe in serving the community through a trauma-informed and culturally responsive and justice-oriented framework that promotes diversity, equity, and accessibility for all.
And hi, everyone. My name is Vanessa Williams. I am a state certified peer support specialist, trainer, mental health advocate. I am also the CEO and founder of Elevate Recovery. I specialize in aiding and supporting individuals and organizations who want to use diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in the workplace culture for increased productivity and peer specialist retention. My areas of expertise include peer support leadership, mentoring, and coaching from a trauma-informed perspective. I am also a lifelong learner, which isn't on there, and I am currently all the dissertation. So yay me, yay, 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 learners.
All right. So it's kind of set up as a workshop style, right? So we got three objectives that we're going to meet today. And it's going to be very interactive. Not really going to go over these because, we want to get to the good stuff. Now I'm going to hand it off to Vanessa, to Ms. Williams.
Oh, wow. Okay, thank you. Okay, so justice doing. When we talk about justice doing, we're talking about a collaborative framework that was created by Dr. Vicki Reynolds. She's out of Canada. There are many pathways to justice doing. It's basically a practice that aligns our collective communities with social justice. For the peer supporters in the house, we know that peer support was born out of the civil rights movement. So it's very activist in nature. So the idea of justice doing takes us back to our roots and reminds us why we're doing this work to begin with. Justice doing, as I'm gonna quote Vicki here, our work occurs in contexts that lack social justice because we have not delivered on a just society. The issues of mental illness, addiction, and trauma are medicalized and sanitized in language that hides human suffering and affronts to dignity. As workers and clients, we are collectively up against the privatization of pain and the criminalization of suffering, such as the criminalization of homelessness, poverty, and dissent. Those are her words. I agree wholeheartedly, but I didn't put those beautiful words together. Uh, Justice doing is an approach that is informed by the decolonizing practice and anti-oppression activism. Two things that peer supporters really lean into. Um, and justice doing can be very transformative. It's transformative not only for us, but the people we work with and the communities and society as a whole. And it also outlines how we can impact how to impact social change in communities. And there's 6 guiding principles that go along with that. You can go to. Thank you. So the 6 guiding principles of justice doing, centering ethics. One of the things that I love about justice doing is how ethics becomes the center of the work. Um, when we move out of ethics, we kind of move into a spiritual pain, which leads to burnout. But that's a whole nother training. But our ethics is how we approach our work, is how we are guided. It's what keeps us going. It's not those ethics that are like the rules, like don't take gifts from clients or and no making inappropriate comments or touch. It's also about what we as individuals consider our ethics to be when we are engaging in this work. Um, solidarity, doing solidarity means that we see all of our work is interconnected. So we're not just working alone. I'm working with Anisa, who's working with someone else, who's working with someone else, and we all come together to get the job done, right? And we all are working together to resist oppression, and whatever that looks like in society, and it looks like a lot. The third guiding principle is addressing power. As a peer support specialist, I am constantly making sure that I am not the one who is maintaining a power hierarchical oppressive structure over the people I'm working with. I am their equal. I'm coming to you as in a friendly way. I don't want to say a friendship way, but definitely in a friendly way. I want to approach you, meet you where you are. I want to understand. I want to have an innate sense of curiosity about your world so I can then see your world, be a part of your world, even if it's just for a little during our time together. Um, and and making sure that I am not pulling power trips or anything like that. I am then working to resist oppression. I don't want to oppress other people. Even as a Black woman, I do have certain levels of privilege, and I am aware of that. Um, I won't get into it, but I definitely understand that just by being a Black woman doesn't mean that I there are areas where I am oppressed, but there are also areas where I definitely have privilege. So I have to be careful with that. Um, you can go to the next one. Thank you. Uh, sustainability, and that's when we have that connectiveness to others. When we are really engaged spiritually in the work we do, making sure that we have the spoons, so to speak. Do I have enough spoons to do this work? Do I have the capacity to experience this work on a full level? Being open, being transparent. Um, another principle, the fifth principle, is engaging with language. Language is everything, and language is very fluid, right? The words that we used last week are we found all of a sudden are not that great this week. Um, let's see, BIPOC is one of those terms. BIPOC is one of the terms that was like the thing. Everybody wants to use it. People are still using it, but it isn't quite right. It doesn't really quite get to the heart of it all, right? While it does a good job of outlining, of separating Black and Indigenous peoples of America, it doesn't really shout out the way we really need it to. So making sure that we are keeping track of language, and not just that, but also understanding that terms like burnout, terms like vicarious trauma, um, are actually terms that are used to oppress people and can be used as a weapon. It's weaponized against workers. So we have to make sure that we are checking our language and structuring safety. And for those of us who are peers, when we work in an office environment, oh, we have to make sure that we think about safety. But the safety is about the workers. The safety is not about the people that we are serving. So understanding that we need to create policies and procedures that do not replicate that same oppression that they're feeling in the streets in the office. So understanding that safety starts with us making sure that our clients, our members, our consumers, however you want to word that, how they are safe. Um, our safety that's our accountability, but we need to also be accountable for the safety of the people we serve. Sorry, my back is itchy. I'm done with that. Oh, so here we're going to ask everyone to, I'm not sure how many people, do we have enough for 6 breakout rooms?
Hey y'all, I don't know what is wrong with Zoom right now, but I'm not seeing an option to do a breakout room. So I'm on the phone with our tech guy right now. I'm so sorry. I don't know why. That's like I've never seen this before. So that's really odd. Maybe that's why y'all couldn't see the option either. Because I thought as co-hosts you should be able to see it, but
You know, that's okay. We can pivot. We can take them, you know, one by one.
Yeah.
Or, you know, or just have a general discussion about it right here. What I'll do is I will put the prompts and the ethics in the, I'm sorry, the guiding principle. I just saw the word ethics and the guiding principles in the chat box, right? For everybody to follow, and we'll just have a general discussion about it. How does that sound?
yeah, I'll try to get it set up for your next breakout. But that sounds good. I like that idea. I'm sorry, y'all.
No worries. Now,
so
it'll sorry, Vanessa, please go ahead.
no, you're good. Okay, I'll go. So while Anissa's doing that, are we gonna have people come off mute or just work in the chat?
No, they can just come off mute, raise their hand, however you want to do it.
Okay, so Anisa is going to put the prompts in the chat, and when she's done with that, if just to keep just so we have people when make it make sense, please raise your virtual or your physical hand. If you don't know how to raise your virtual hand, there is at the bottom of the screen there should be a little smiley type face that has the word reactions under it. If you click that, there should be a little pop-up box that comes up, and then you can just raise your hand just like that. And then when you're done, you can lower hand. So the first question, the first prompt is centering ethics. Wait, that's not a prompt. There it is. Okay. So what does this principle of justice doing mean to me? And how can I ground myself in my work in this principle of justice doing? So I'm okay if you just pick out of one of the 6: centering ethics, doing solidarity, addressing power, sustainability, language, safety, and just kind of talk about what that means to you, or if you have a question about it, feel free to ask a question. Yes, Larry.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I volunteer at Share Downtown LA, and I don't know if please tell me if this is off topic or something, but downtown LA is patrolled by LAPD Central Division, and I have had what's the word? I've had I and other people downtown have a complex relationship with the LAPD at Share. On the one hand, when some violent incident occurs on the premises, we call 911 and get the police in. And on the other hand, most of the people who come in the door, and I'm thinking of one person in particular, have great difficulty being harassed by the LAPD, and individual officers do very bad things to individual people who come in the door, and this all gets very complex. And for me, I don't feel comfortable calling the LAPD, to deal with, some kind of problem, because they're likely to use force. And at the same time, I can't let violence take place out of control. And at the same time, when the LAPD shows up, there are probably going to be several people in the room who are just going to bug out because that individual officer has threatened them, etc. It's very difficult. I don't know. Do you have any experience with that?
I have experience with that from being the person that 911 is called on, not LAPD, but Mesa, Tempe, Chicago, yeah, pretty much all over the country. So I am one of those people that has the police called on them a lot, or used to. Not because I was violent, but because I would not stop talking. But I will say that that is a very complex issue. You have an incident, a conflict that breaks out in the center, and you are then probably, due to policies and procedures, are have to notify the authorities, which brings in an oppressive LAPD. And I think we don't have to live in LA to have known all the story, some of the stuff behind LAPD throughout decades of incidents. My question would be, when these issues happen, when these conflicts occur, you're bringing in an outside party to diffuse the situation, but the outside party is not going to diffuse. They're actually going to agitate, instigate, and make the situation worse, and it's going to traumatize other people in the area. So my question back to you is, at any point, do you, after the situation, after the police are gone and all that, is there any feedback from the actual community you're serving to find out how to avoid it in the future?
No, I don't get feedback from the community on how to avoid it. What I that's a good question. Because I don't call the LAPD unless there's actual, if it's a conflict, I know how to handle conflict. Okay, we're talking about physical violence with weapons.
Yeah, I know. I understand.
The LAPD unless it has to be pretty extreme. And the thing about downtown is things can go from 0 to 100 and nothing flat. And I've had, multiple conflicts, shall we say, break out at the same time and that kind of thing. And it's pretty chaotic sometimes. And it's just that, I just really hate, calling them because, I know their relationships with community members outside of Share, on the street, because they told me about them. And I don't, I just kind of have a problem with that. I don't know if I answered
Yeah.
I didn't answer it.
Larry, not familiar with downtown LA, and I'm not familiar with the system there, but is there a co-responder or mobile crisis unit that you could call? Because if the incident is mental health related, or I'm assuming that the center is for people who have certain, certain challenges or certain things that they might be working on and stuff like that, So, a lot of times there are going to be officers who will come out with mobile crisis or in a co-responder unit that'll come out with a social worker, right? Or a counselor that might be crisis intervention trained.
Yeah, Jess, do you know anything about that? Do you have any knowledge of that?
I don't know what the system is in LA, but I might look into that if I were you.
Yeah. Jess, do you know anything about that at all?
Yeah.
Sorry,
So
Larry was talking to me because I live here. I only know of like the pet team. That's really it.
And the pet team, I don't even know if that exists anymore. I mean,
I think it does.
When somebody needs to be 5150, we don't call the police, we call the fire department, and they send paramedics out. Because we don't want the police 50 or 5150 and things, people. The LAFD paramedics, are trained. And
but
that's the only resource I know of.
so I would look into alternatives to it, where it's because it is going to be because they're escalating. Is something escalating? Is something internal or external in the environment that's happening that's causing this? It's not just because they want to be violent, right?
No,
So
no. I mean,
Right.
yeah, but we
it
want to move
probably-
on. Yeah, we want to move on to Becky's had her hand up for a while. So
Yeah,
just
thank
look
you.
into it and see. Thank you so much, Larry.
Thank you. I wanted to share about this principle of justice doing. This is a fascinating topic to me. I really enjoyed listening to your introduction. You know, to me, I was in a presentation earlier, and we were talking about the pure workforce and lived experience, and justice doing in terms of you know, you talked about the oppression, addressing power was one of your principles, addressing power. And so addressing our power in terms of the pure workforce and our career ladders and things like that, and how as people with lived experience, we are, it seems as if the system kind of put us at this lower pay in because of the start and the way the credentials worked and all that kind of stuff. And so in terms of what is justice, some of us have really demonstrated we have a amazing capacity to make a difference in the lives of people like us who are trying to recover. And just as effective in many ways in a different way than clinicians and other people that are getting paid a lot more. And so we're talking about strategies we can use addressing power, not just what you were talking about, the resisting the oppression that's keeping us kind of in this box, you know, at the ceiling, the glass ceiling, but also addressing our own power to get out of this box and to, you know, expand our capacity. So I think justice doing to me is empowerment, you know, for what we believe in and what we think are our value in society. I'll pass with that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Becky. I really appreciate what you said on several, just a lot, but the career ladder for peer supports, when you mentioned peer supporters coming in at the bottom, and I find this fascinating, and this is one thing that I'm working on, that Anisa and I are working on right now, is this notion that an organization can bring in 3 or 4 peer support specialists and say that they are now an inclusive organization. No, inclusion is not a bottom up thing. Inclusion is a top down. You have to have peer support specialists on your board of directors. You need a peer support specialist in your C-suite. You need a peer support specialist at the director level, at the manager level. You create that structure before you bring in your 3 or 4 little peer supporters. We're not here. We don't go in a place so we can be, so we can take the role of whatever a case manager doesn't feel like doing today. We have our own set of guiding ethics. We have our own set of guiding principles that we live and work by. And it isn't going to matter how many peers you bring into an organization. If we don't have a say at the top, it's not going to trickle down to the bottom. I'm still waiting on Reaganomics. I'm just saying. Anyway, I'm sorry. That was I probably shouldn't have said that. I apologize, but I apologize. That's a soapbox for me. It's top down, not bottom up. You can't expect a person who is making poverty wages to stand up against the chief executive officer. But you can, if you have a chief recovery officer or chief wellness and recovery officer, they can stand up and they can fight to ensure that peer supporters are paid equitably, fairly, and have a career ladder that actually means something and doesn't lead to having to go get clinical licensure just to, pay off your student loans.
So Vanessa, that was very well said. And that is justice doing to me, seeing that lived out. You said it very well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Becky. Did anyone else have any comments or questions about justice doing? If not, we will move on because I know I can talk a lot. And I know a few of y'all know me and I could be here talking forever about one thing. So Okay, Anisa, it's on you. You're on mute.
Oh, you're muted, Anisa.
Oh, I said something came through in the chat, and it was you, Vanessa. All right. You just, where did my presentation go? There it is. All right. Oh, well, I guess you guys are going to get to see it all over again. All right, trauma. Sorry about that. So you guys are probably here all familiar with trauma. So this is just a general definition of it, based on Sams's definition of it. It's just, a series of events or a set of circumstances that can occur over extended periods of time that are harmful to an individual, that may have lasting effects on that individual's physical, mental, emotional, and/or spiritual well-being. These can manifest, the effects can manifest over the course of a lifetime, and vary in severity and form. And it's just a natural response to something that is abnormal, right? Just totally natural. So the 3 E's of trauma are the event, the experience, and the effects. And the event is just something external, right? And it just triggers the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. It can happen once or over a period or multiple times. And this is what I like to call the who, what, where, and when of the trauma, right? The experience is just basically the inner, I don't know what's going on with my mouse. The inner perception of the trauma, in combination with the external supports. And that is the why of the trauma, and the effects are just the possible lasting change in actions, emotions, and/or worldviews. The adaptation, right? It's just the adaptation. It's what an individual does. It's what I did. It's what anyone would do just to deal with and survive and live within those circumstances or that event. It's the how of the trauma. So why is not the event? The event isn't the trauma. The trauma is just basically, and it doesn't matter. There's no big T, little t, right? Doesn't matter the magnitude of the event, series of event, or set of circumstances. That's not what determines the level of traumatization, right? It's the situational perception, internal process that the individual experiences, and the quality of external supports that make this determination, right? It's what happens on the inside and how much support, the quality of that support that the individual receives as they're going through that, right? You could have 2 people in the same car accident. One person can get in a car the next day, and the other person cannot get into a car ever again, or for a year, or for a month. Okay, So we'll just have this in discussion since we can't do, so the experience of trauma is unique to everyone because I'll put that in the chat box. So why do we think that since traumatic experiences are so unique to everyone, the effects, the lasting effects of them, you have two siblings coming out of the same household, roughly around the same age, and they're not affected in the same way. Why is this so unique to everybody?
Hi everyone, this is Marslin. I'm a certified peer specialist from the state of Pennsylvania.
Hi.
From what I come to observe, serving participants in that type of scenario, everybody processes things different. And a lot of things, like some people say, their traumatic experiences are normalcy because of pre-exposure, what goes on in the home. And sometimes what is normal to others could be abnormal to myself. But you know, from what you've been pre-exposed to and you're used to it, like example, if there's two children in the family and there's one parent always scolding one child versus the other or shaming, you know, the child that is accustomed to that type of behavior, it becomes a normalcy. The other child may say, ask the why question. But from what I've been studying about the parts of the brain, there's other components that come into place. And sometimes, people just detach. You can mentally and emotionally detach when you're in a physical situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Marslin. Yes, Chris?
So I was gonna say something that I think about with why trauma will impact others differently. Everyone's individual. I think traumas can kind of like build upon each other. So it depends. Like the example you gave, the car incident, the two individuals may act differently based on prior traumas as well, and how they've internalized those traumas they've gone through before. So what may seem small to one may seem a lot bigger to another because now they're relating it as well to something from the past or something that maybe didn't happen to them, but a fear that they have.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, Jessica?
Ooh, okay, so my opinion on this is that, thinking about like two kids growing up, dealing with like the same type of trauma, like an alcoholic father, I do feel like they kind of like those two siblings can come together in their experience of like how awful this was, but like their trauma response can be very different. Like one has this powerful resentment who really wants nothing to do with dad. And then the other one sees that dad today is trying, maybe the younger sibling, right? Sees that today dad's trying and that resentment isn't as strong. I feel like it's literally like the age difference. Like maybe the older sibling had, kind of like what Chris said, right? Like other traumas, but maybe also the older sibling had a more powerful, longer relationship with dad that meant something to them. And so, like, this feels like a deeper, more powerful betrayal internally, emotionally, I guess, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense. But, like, something as simple as that, like, just like this sibling being a bit older and having, a little bit longer of a relationship with dad or, whatever it is, like things like that I feel like can also impact how people respond to trauma and how it's unique to people.
Mm-hmm. So we have in the chat from Chris, makes sense, and it's a really good point. They're all really good points.
I'm curious to know what y'all think.
Me? Anisa? Anisa. I believe trauma is very subjective. For me, I don't know. I think I spent over a year living in Las Vegas, so nothing. I always say nothing can traumatize me more than that. So, and I can't even talk about it because it stays there, right? But yeah, trauma is very subjective. I think there's everyone has touched on it. Um, there's the things that we've experienced already in our lives, and how we internalize that. For me, I growing up, I internalized anything that went wrong. I took that and internalized it as I did it, even though it had nothing to do with me. So it really depends on the individual and just how their inner workings, how they connect to the world around them. Um, Being an only child, growing up, everything was my fault. I couldn't even blame the dog, right? It's like I can blame the dog. Why did it get broke? It was a dog. You know, that only works a couple of times. So I was the only one that I had to take the fall for everything that went wrong in the house, face gets broken, something, unless it was obviously the dog. I normally did not pee in the corner. But, you know, but so for me, everything was an internalization. Growing up, I internalized it. If anything went wrong in the house or, with my friends, it was my fault. And that's where that thought process came from. So it just, there's there are a lot of external factors involved when it comes to trauma and how we internalize it.
Yes, Larry?
Yeah, I'd like to address the why of trauma. And an awful lot of, I'll speak for myself. I have a very severe history of trauma, and I always blame myself. I always took responsibility for it. And, I had all these PTSD symptoms and clinicians, pathologized my experience. Wow, I'm going to give you a diagnosis, and here you take this medication, and you need this therapy. And that was helpful. But at one point, a clinician said to me, really, all that you've got going on here is a very normal response to a very abnormal situation. And that was the one thing that a clinician ever said to me that was really comforting and helpful. No, you're not crazy. You just had a very normal response to a very abnormal situation.
Ooh, thank you for that, Larry. And talk about justice doing. That hits that right on the head when we talk about how how trauma and burnout and self-care are weaponized against not only peer support specialists but the people that we serve. It's used as a weapon, and that's why that going back to that language and us as peers being able to sit up and verbalize exactly what you were saying, Larry, and say, hey, that is not okay. And honestly, all of those clinicians before that, there was, throwing a pill at it. That is like a microaggression. Heck, is a macroaggression. Oh, you're broken, so here's a pill.
Okay, you got a problem. Yeah, Larry, you got a problem. The problem is you, Larry. Gee,
Right.
no diagnosis.
Right. It couldn't possibly be that society is jacked up and that and that many of us are being oppressed at so many sides that we are it's a reaction. It's how we are learning to resist that oppression. So
Yeah,
thank you.
that's similar to the situation with the LAPD.
Mhm.
It's like, yeah, the LAPD is oppressing people, and at times it's yeah, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
Me too. I'm sorry, I
It
feel
is
like I
the
hyped.
adaptation. It is the adaptation. All right. So, well, Jessica, you said you were interested in the thoughts, right? So this time I won't go back from the beginning. From here. But there you go.
Wait, is that my slide? That's not my slide.
Nope.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so this is just a little list that, and it's by no means a comprehensive list, right? And you guys touched on points that aren't even on here. Your point, Jessica, about the relationship, it's not even on here. Yeah, it's very intuitive and it's very right on the head, right? That betrayal, that deeper betrayal.
Yeah, that's a good list though. I'm curious really quick. Sorry to
Okay, sure, we can go
just
back.
jump in. I mean, I'm not 100% sure, but are these like, would these be considered like social determinants of health? Do y'all know?
No,
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 not the same.
not the same.
Okay, I'm tripping.
Yeah,
Some of them are,
a little bit, but
yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
overlap a bit, but not. I gotcha. Yeah.
I mean, it's psychology, so it all overlaps. One thing leads to another.
so that brings us to, this is
Intersection.
you.
Okay, so intersectionality is wow, it is a theory. It is a theory in the theoretical framework. The term was first coined by Professor Kimberly Crenshaw back in 1989. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and name it. I'm sorry if this offends anyone, but intersectionality was born out of critical race theory and critical queer theory and critical Asian theory and critical Latin theory and critical, yeah, all those theories. Intersectionality also brought us Black feminist theory. Oh my goodness, queer feminist theory. There's so many. I can't even come up with them all. I can't even name them all. Anyway, intersectionality is that concept that acknowledges that oppression, discrimination, power, and privilege are linked through our different social groupings and our various identities. So that would include race, socioeconomic status. It could also include religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, your abilities, your disabilities, all the various ways that people can be othered by people who create the isms, right? Classism, sexism, all the isms, right? So all of that is, we all occupy more than one space. When we talk about we are all whole human beings, that means that not only there's the things you can see or the things you believe you see, that I'm a Black or African American woman, but I'm also a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a student, I own my own business, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a spiritual being that doesn't ascribe to any specific religion, but I don't like bowling. I love shopping. I love the Cubs and the Bears, not the White Sox. So I belong to all these different little social groups, as well as the identities. There are identities that we choose, like who we like as our sports teams, what type of clothing we like to wear. Those are things we can choose. But then there's things that are ascribed to us by society, such as race, and well, culture. We can claim our own culture, right? But yeah, so um, so there are multiple ways that people can experience oppression. Um, as a Black woman, not only do I face racism, but I also experience sexism, and sometimes I experience them both at the same time. You can change the slide, Anisa. Thank you. So when we look at intersectionality, we can look at it as a prism on trauma. Just like I said, there are multiple ways that I can experience, that I view the world, and that I can experience the world and experience all the isms thrown at me. So intersectionality is a tool that allows us to think about adversity on a larger spectrum, in a broader context. And we want to, and yet still individualize those experiences to understand the how people experience both privilege, power, and oppression. Now, there are ways, I told you about the ways in which, I can experience discriminatory actions against me, such as racism, sexism, but there's also levels which I can also oppress people. I can also be that discriminatory person. Because of my level of education, that's one way. To people who may not have a high school diploma, I might look like, I'm something special because I'm working on a PhD. I'm not. No, I'm not. But still, that level of education gives me a level of privilege. For the most part, I'm cisgender. I'm a cisgender woman, so that's a level of privilege. If my parents were alive and you'd ask them, I'd be a Christian, which is something that is pretty much that's a level of privilege in America, right? Yeah, the rest of them are pretty much a no-go. I'm pretty much oppressed after that. I don't really want to read off the slide because I feel like it's kind of like, I don't want to do that. But when people experience trauma, and I'll talk about this from a way that might make a little bit more sense. So when we talk about like microaggressions, there are ways that microaggressions can affect a person on not just one level, but on multiple levels. So, and I can give you an example. One time I was at work. I won't say which job place, but I was at work, and I mentioned that I grew up in Chicago. And the first thing out of someone's mouth was, "Oh, wow, that must have been really hard for you. Like, I'm surprised you made it out of there alive." What? And I looked at them kind of puzzled, and they were like, "Well, growing up in the projects." I'm like, "I don't remember saying I grew up in the projects. You made a lot of assumptions there." When you made the assumption that I grew up in the projects, you made an assumption about my socioeconomic status, you made an assumption about violence, you made this, okay, there's a lot of assumptions there. And a lot there were multiple microaggressions, right? Because they hit on race, because if I was white and they said that, they would have probably asked, "Well, what suburb do you live in?" But all types of little undercuts, those paper cuts. I did not grow up in the projects. I grew up in a middle class home with two parents. My parents were married. Yeah, they owned their home. Yeah, I did not grow up in that type of environment. So, and as for violence, what we used to do belt fights with the belt buckles. I don't know. That's about as most that's yeah. I yeah, I've never been robbed in Chicago. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm not saying that Chicago's a big city, it's huge. So yeah, we're talking like LA, right? It's huge. Is there violence? Sure. Is it bad? I'm gonna be honest with you. Even right now today, as much as you hear about Chicago being violent, it's not even it's not even in the top 10. It's like number 12 or something. There are other cities that are much more violent than Chicago, believe it or not, but that's not the narrative, right? But as you can see, this individual hit me with microaggressions on various identities, various ways that I identify with. So we have to be really, really mindful when we're providing services for people that we actually listen. That was one of the main problems I had receiving services, mental health services, was that there was never anyone who really understood some of the things that I needed to talk about as a black woman. There were certain things that were affecting me when I was in workspaces that I would bring into my discussions with my provider, and they would just say, "Well, maybe it's not what you think it is. Maybe maybe you're just taking it too personal." I'm like, "Okay, here we go again." All right. Back then, I didn't have the name microaggressions to assign to it, but still, it was like, then there's another trauma, and now you're adding more trauma to my already traumatic psychiatric treatment traumas. Just keep piling them on, right? Anyway, you can go to the next slide.
Actually, assuming that you grew up in the projects doesn't sound like a microaggression to me. It sounds like a macroaggression.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. True. Very true. Definitely an environment. Yeah, there's definitely one could kind of, well, no, that's not environment. No, environmental microaggression is totally different. But yeah, yeah, that is more of a macro. It's like I'm black, so I lived in the project. Wow. I mean, yeah. It's kind of like when the police officer came up to me and was like, "What's your name?" And I told him my name. He's like, "Oh, I thought your name was Shaniqua." And I'm like, "The fudge? Really?" I'm like, yeah. Needless to say, I went to jail that day because I cussed him out. Anyway, I don't take that much. I will now because I get bill money. Like, I'll be a equal. I ain't got no bill money. Um, oh man. But so trauma and the dynamics of privilege. So if we look at this very complex looking, well, but it's not really that complex. In the center, we have power. And as we move further and further out, there comes we get further away from the power, and then we can see the identities that become marginalized. So in the power, you have white, post-secondary degrees, able bodies, heterosexual, neurotypical, blah, 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 own property, speaks English, blah, 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 citizen. But then as we pull out, we get into the marginalization of others, right? Women, different shade, maybe a darker, a tad, a more tanned shade, maybe some disability, and I would go on to say some invisible disabilities, right? Gay men, neuroatypical, average body, renters. Oh my God, how far out on this? I'm not even renting. I'm in an Airbnb. Is that renting? Okay. How many ways am I? This is messed up. Anyway, middle class, learned English, documented. So that's like pulling away from the power, from the center of power. And then again, you pull out one more time, and then you have undocumented, dark skin, only in elementary education, significant disability, lesbian, bi, pan, asexual, significantly neurodivergent, vulnerable. Wow, vulnerable mental health. All right, I don't like the term large. I like fluffy, fluffy as a body size. And housing, homelessness, and then the circle just keeps going. Being poor, being non English speaking, being trans, intersection, non-binary. Yeah, these are all, the further you get away from the power, the center of power, the more you're marginalized. Okay. So, and just for context, this is mostly based on an Americanized version. Am I correct? Because if you go into other countries, it may not be like this. Although I will say, even on the continent of Africa, lighter skin is becoming a thorn. Bleaching cream is just sold like it's like a big business over there. Anyway, yeah, you can go ahead. Go. Am I still talking? Oh my God. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Oppression. So oppression is the result of when people use privilege and power over another person at their expense, right? So it can exist, as we just talked about, with the wheel of oppression. I mean, that's what I want to call it, the wheel of oppression back there, the power wheel. It can exist in different forms and across many levels. It could be, going selling a kid selling lemon, black girl selling lemonade, having a lemonade stand in front of her house, and someone calls the police because she doesn't have a peddler's license. I don't know what that's supposed to be. Or whatever. Or somebody having a black man having someone call the police on him because he's bird watching. It could also look like a woman being hired into a position in the company with all men, and she's the only woman. So oppression can happen on different levels across different ways. Inequity is the distribution of and access to resources that affects the individual's physical, emotional, mental, and or spiritual being. I feel like did I miss something? I feel like I missed something. Okay, I'm gonna do it that way. I'm sorry. So we start with the individual, and that's how we. I'm sorry, you all. I was going off this lane. I need to go off the other one. Sorry. So we look at this beautiful picture that Anisa created. We see the individual is in the middle. The individual is not in the middle, but that's where we want to look at the individual, our beliefs, our prejudices, our experiences, our actions. When we come out of that, there's an interpersonal. That's the relationships between people, in different groups, how we move around, how we talk to one another, and that's where the biases and the prejudices come in. But then there's also another level when we pan out again to the institutions. And this is what Larry was referring to, the institution that is known as the LAPD, modern day policing, which most of us know is a hand me down from the slave patrols and how they are very violent when they interact with certain populations, not just Black, but also those experiencing homelessness, those experiencing a mental health crisis. So the institutions also have their own biases. Why? Because they're filled with individuals who then have interpersonal communications with others, right? Institutional oppression also has to do with the rules, the laws, the policies, the policy that says that Larry has to call the police when there's a violent outbreak, even though it doesn't sit well here in Larry's soul because he knows what that outcome will be. I'm sorry, Larry, I'm just throwing you under the bus.
Either she or they. It's not.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't. Let me put my glasses on. I apologize. So when they have to call the police, knowing that that's going to be problematic for the individuals who are there and also for the individuals who aren't even involved, that's institutional. When we pull out even further, we see the systemic oppressions that can happen when all of these systems operate together. So we have laws that then are handed down and create policies and structures. Just the fact that the hierarchy exists where one group is benefiting more than the other. I don't want to go. I'm not going to go there, but I hope that makes sense. And Larry, I deeply apologize. I have my glasses back on so I can see now. So sorry. You can change the slide.
All right. So we've got a couple of quotes here just to take a break. Because we went over some stuff that, you know, was pretty heavy. So it is not our differences that divide us. It is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. Audre Lorde. And then if you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. Lila Watson. So culturally responsive care. And let me see if I can, yeah, I can. Good. I can move this out. So culturally responsive care is the intentional and consistent decision to see, respect, and celebrate the aspects that can make each individual unique. It is an acknowledgement of their intersectional existence in the world and how it shapes their experiences. So a couple of things about culturally responsive care. You know, consider without judgment. Engage in conversations about all aspects of the individual experience of life and how it has shaped the person. Cross-cultural interpersonal skills. self-awareness, self-reflective, actively consider your own biases, privilege and power, openness, be flexible, curious, and willing to grow. Actively engage in anti-oppressive practices, which consider power imbalances to foster an environment that is free from racism, oppression, and other forms of harmful dynamics. Yes, Larry?
So, in this context, how can I, as a peer support specialist, either minimize or ideally eliminate microaggressions that I'm perhaps not even aware of?
Through self-awareness and self-reflection and being open to feedback from others, I would say, right? Because sometimes we are unaware, it's unconscious, right? And through always engaging in a learning process, right? So actively go and learn. And it's not just in a classroom, it's learning from life, right? And being willing to somebody put in here the Harvard, Jessica put in here the Harvard implicit bias test. There's also a bias index or codex online that you can get. It's free, right? It's just like a JPEG or something like that. And it lists all the different kinds of biases that we have. And everybody's got biases, right? Some of them are intentional. You know, microaggressions can be unintentional and intentional. And it's just being open and receptive to that feedback, right? And listening and learning from that and actively going to trainings on it, workshops on it, and just continually being aware and reflective with yourself.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And Vanessa put something in the chat as well for you, Larry. So understanding cultural differences, recognizing potential biases, and looking beyond differences to work productively with children, families, and communities whose cultural contexts are different from one's own. Cultural responsiveness enables individuals and organizations to respond respectively and effectively to people of all cultures, languages, socioeconomic backgrounds, races, ethnicities, abilities, religions, genders, sexual orientations, and other diversity factors in a manner that recognizes, affirms, and values their worth. So we're gonna go through COPE really fast. COPE for being trauma-informed and culturally responsive. It's C stands for connection, O stands for openness, P stands for partnership, and E stands for engagement. Unfortunately, we've got about 7 minutes, so we're not going to be able to do this activity. So we're just going to go straight to this. So connection. So this is a vital component to effective trauma-informed support. It involves a multitude of skills, curiosity, openness, relatability, flexibility, and authenticity, amongst and a myriad of others. This is by no means, again, an exhaustive list. And there are times that you are going to be in a state of disconnection with the people that you may be serving or with others that you're in relationship with, right? And it's an opportunity for self and relational growth, right? So it is a key component for building a strong relationship based on mutuality and respect. and safety as both parties have defined it. It's not, safety is not as one party defines it. It's what both parties have defined it. And it's an ongoing process. So openness. It's essential when serving those healing from trauma. Honesty and transparency, self-disclosure, building rapport, and over time trust. Sharing experiences creates affinity and bonds. So when you're in alignment with mutuality, the trust is mutual. If there's resistance to this, before looking to others, look inwards. That's what I have always found, right? That the resistance may be internal. So partnership. So it's inviting people into the process, right? That is the essence of it. Respecting their right to the dignity of risk, self-directed choice, walking with them on their chosen pathway as a true mutual partner, honoring them in their choices. That will foster connection and trust while strengthening the relationship. It's a we dynamic, right? And both parties nurture that in respect and mutuality. So it's collaboration and co-creation. Those are the key components of partnership. And engagement. Engaging the individual on what inspires them, brings them joy, and makes them thrive is crucial for understanding and connecting in the moment, right? Meeting them where they are and sharing one's own experiences will build trust and foster growth, which is foundational for effective support when working with those living with trauma. So some things to try when engaging, there's motivational interviewing, active listening, and relational support, right? Like IPS, intentional peer support, is a relational model. That's a great model. Are indispensable tools when engaging. So 3 minutes left. We've got some comments in the chat.
Yes, DJ had mentioned, wrote in the chat that she states I have to admit that I've yet to see the philosophy of culturally responsive practices being utilized during my interactions with mental health service providers, and that's really disheartening. And of course, I agree that it's disheartening. Unfortunately, even part, and this is only part because not all states are like this. I do know Florida and Texas have pretty much outlawed anything that has to do with cultural, anything DEI that could be construed as DEI related, which is unfortunate. Those type of laws limit how people can learn to do better. Because this isn't a DEI isn't about putting someone in a position of authority who's not qualified. It's about making sure that you're able to have conversations that aren't doing harm to the people you're serving, no matter what type of no matter what that serving looks like, whether you're a waitress, whether you're in mental health, whether you are a politician, baking cakes, whatever. We need to be able to have dialogues that aren't harmful to other people. And yes, I get it. Yes, this people do have freedom of speech. You don't have freedom of speech at work, though. That doesn't apply. There's no such thing as freedom of speech at work. And people can be called out on that, and people can be and should be reprimanded. But it's up to us too when we um, are have been dealt that blow. by mental health providers or anyone, we need to be able to also, we got to go say, hey, can I speak to your manager? Right. Like, hey, I need to talk to somebody. I need to file a complaint. Because unfortunately, it's just going to keep happening until we stand up and say no more.
Nice. Nice. Thank you, Vanessa. Well, I just put some parting thoughts for you guys. Because we did discuss a lot of heavy stuff in here. Healing and growth from trauma can come from. And we'd love to hear from you. You know, today's experience was, for me, was, if you want to just share and just start thinking about one thing I might want to begin practicing implementing is, and just start thinking one thing I may want to do for my own wellness this evening is, right? You're at a conference, it's a long day. Just start thinking about taking care of yourself tonight. Well, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate you. It's been great having you, and you know, you had other options. So, and if you have any questions or comments, we can stay on for another couple of minutes.
Totally. Okay, y'all are awesome. I love like the combo of y'all two. That was really great. My personal opinion, outside of just being a host, I really enjoyed that. So thank you both. Round of applause for Vanessa and Anisa, y'all.
Allow me to